Okay, welcome everyone. This is my presentation answering the question, what is psychological advantageousness? And I just wanted to walk y'all through where the concept came from, what is the concept, and how I'm using it in my research. So I'm going to share this slideshow I put together. 1 second. All right, so where did the construct come from? Basically, it's a bunch of different experiences I've had kind of merged together, a little from here, a little from there, kind of putting them together. The first one I can start with was in my undergrad years, I studied philosophy was one of my majors. And in one of the philosophy classes, I remember we were tasked to basically develop arguments that supported our beliefs. So the professor presented us with a situation where he was saying, you can believe whatever you want, but there's whatever you choose to believe should be able to withstand some critique. And so it was a challenge, and more for some than others. And I remember us, I share an anecdote, like one of the students that was Christian at the time ended up walking out the class because they felt offended by the questioning. And this is, some speculation because I actually didn't talk to the student about how they felt, but it seemed like they were offended by the fact that their beliefs were faith-based and did not necessarily stand up to critique. So when people started asking questions, for whatever reason, they left and they seemed very upset. But that was a very memorable moment for me. I mean, obviously, I still remember it to this day, 10 or more years later. And I just thought that was an impactful experience, that to give people the freedom to choose whatever you want to believe, you have free will. And at the same time, whatever you choose, that's what people are going to, I guess, pick apart or analyze or challenge, which, if the belief doesn't withstand the challenge, one might think you might go back to the drawing board and say, all right, let me choose a better one that's more durable, more sturdy, that can actually withstand the challenge. So then it creates this back and forth process of like trial and error. Well, it could. Or somebody could just say, I'm not doing this. My beliefs are my beliefs. This is what I believe. I don't need to justify it to anybody, and just hold on to it and like try to turn your back on the critiques. That was one moment where it became very clear to me that for some beliefs, we just choose them arbitrarily. We choose them because that's how we were raised. We choose them because that's what most people are telling us. That's the messages that we've been inundated with as we've grown up. And so we don't really have a conscious choice in choosing those beliefs. It's just like first come, first serve. Similar to language, people typically speak the language, whatever the first language they're introduced to, at least first language they're introduced to consistently, that's the one that they pick. But it's not like people sit there with a menu of languages and they're like, yeah, I want French to be my first language, or I want English to be my first language. In a similar way, like if you grow up in a Christian household, it makes sense that you would be Christian because you're going to get raised in a Christian manner. They're going to take you to church. They're going to show you how to pray. They're going to introduce you to God and spirituality through the lens of Christian religion. And so for a time in that person's life, that's all they're going to know. And so even if the beliefs aren't necessarily evaluated in terms of like, can they withstand critique? They may present some familiarity. They may present some nostalgia. They may feel like keeping up with a family tradition. So there's a lot of these other emotional reasons why people choose their beliefs or hold on or latch on to certain beliefs, even if they're not um, beliefs that could withstand critique if they were criticized. Also, if you insulate yourself in a community of like-minded people, then you probably never have to expose or reveal the fact that the beliefs can't withstand critique. My other experience that's related to the development of this construct of psychological advantageousness um, is just growing up in North New Jersey. Shout out North New Jersey, that's my hometown. And my experience growing up there was a lot going on. There's a lot of social organizations, and you had options on which one to join. In my teenage years, street teams was a big thing. So people were forming like cliques. We already had like gang culture, and you also had social organizations like, which I didn't know at the time, but like fraternities, sororities, Masons, Rotary Club, things like that. It's a bunch of different organizations, and to add on top of that, teenagers were doing these street teams. They would throw parties. They would fight together. They would hang out together. It was a lot of them. If you're from Newark or Essex County, you was there in the mid 2010s or early 2000s. You probably remember street teams or maybe even join one. But with so many options on like join this or join that, it's a similar question of why do people choose what they choose? Am I am I choosing to be blood because my family's blood and I grew up blood and my neighborhood's blood? Am I choosing to be Crip because I seen it on TV and it sound cool and it looked cool when they throw up the gang signs? Or am I just choosing it because if I put it on paper, being Crip actually has these advantages for me, or being blood actually has these advantages for me, or being neutral is actually going to have these advantages for me. And I think it was for much of my upbringing, it wasn't very clear, and I never really heard people question or like juxtapose the different options for which gang to join. And even people were criticized for flip flopping. Like if you was blood one year, you switched to Crip. That was like, people would feel some type of way or talk about you for doing that. And it's interesting because now, as I get into this research, it's like the person who did flip flop may have changed their reason. They may have realized, oh, I joined the organization I knew nothing about, didn't know what I was getting into, and then you find out this other one is better. It's reasonable as a full grown adult. It's reasonable that you might make a different decision. But I think at least back then there was a lot more emotionality involved in this idea of loyalty. So it was like you can't just be blood today, be Crip tomorrow. It was offensive to people, and I think it would lead to people questioning that individual's integrity. And yeah, so that was another experience of in real life. I live in an environment where it's gang culture and it's organizations, and before you join one, you do have options. You can commit to one or the other, but how do you know which one to pick? And so that was another situation I think about where it's like it's very clear that people aren't necessarily making informed decisions about what they're selecting. People may choose things arbitrarily on a first come, first served basis. And the third situation that helped me come up with this construct of psychological advantageousness is therapy and this notion of mindfulness. Mindfulness is this idea basically of increasing awareness, being more mindful, being more aware of what you're doing, why you're doing it, how is it working for you, how is it not working for you. Um, Taking time to like slow your life down and really observe your outputs and your inputs. And then when you become more informed, you could make more informed decisions. So that mindfulness, I guess, a culture of mindfulness that I had gotten into, and me becoming more observant of my own life, helped me come up with this idea of how is it, how is your choice working for you? Which was actually a question that therapists sometimes ask. You may say to your therapist, yeah, I smoke crack every day. And the therapist might ask, how is that working for you? Is smoking crack every day benefiting you? Is it not benefiting you? In what ways is it doing either? And so I think the same could be asked about any beliefs. Like you can choose to believe whatever you want, but how is it working for you? And as we become more mindful of that, we can make more informed decisions. And so the idea of psychological advantageousness essentially is about the relationship between, um, I'll have to like get into more detail as we go through the slides about what the MEII and the QOL are, but basically psychological advantageousness is the relationship between these two other constructs. You have this, if we use the model of like a computer, people have an internal processing system, how they filter information, how they make things make sense to them. If you and I were to watch a TV show or see a picture, when our eyes pick up, whatever the visual imagery is, we still have to interpret it and find a meaning to it. And the meaning that I find in it and the meaning you find in it might be two different meanings, but that's not based on just what your eyes are seeing. It's also based on how you feel about what you're seeing, what you call what you're seeing. Have you seen this before? So there's a host of internal faculties and characteristics within the individual that's going to filter their outputs, like how they interact with what they're seeing, what they do about what they're seeing, things like that. So I'll go to the next one. Okay. This is just a working definition of psychological advantageousness. It refers to the differential impact of someone's mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure, their MEII, or its components on their quality of life. And I say or its components because you have a gestalt MEII, like the whole thing, or we can just hone in on like one part of it, right? So if you could imagine it was like a pizza, you trying to see like how is the whole pizza pie affecting your life, or like how is the pepperoni affecting your life? How is the cheese? How is the bread? How is the, I don't know, whatever seasoning they put on it? So both will have an effect. And similarly, the MEII consists of beliefs, um, affective states, affective traits, moods, your language, your knowledge, your cognitive schema. Not trying to bog you down with a lot of terms, but yes, it basically encompasses everything that's going on in someone's internal world. So that includes too many things to be measured all in one study. But the point of it is to acknowledge that there is this internal world that each individual has. And then on the other hand, we have their quality of life. And so psychological advantageousness is looking at or refers to the relationship between whatever's going on in this person's internal world and their quality of life. If you're interested, there's a book called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, where he kind of talks about that idea. I believe I have a slide in here so I can expound on it more later. But basically, the idea is like who you are on the inside is going to affect what you get like out of life, how much you enjoy it, how much money you earn, your relationships, everything that may go into your quality of life. So just to give more details on the MEII, let me maximize this. Just to give more detail on the MEII, basically it refers to the intrapsychic world of the individual. It consists of cognitive, affective, and spiritual content, and that includes their paradigms, their beliefs, their moods, et cetera, et cetera. The image on the left is actually a painting that I did, and it's part of a body of work because saying it doesn't always convey as accurately what I'm trying to get across as painting it. Like when I paint it, I feel like it helps people grasp the concept. And this painting is the ontological projection process. However, for MEII, if you just focus on the middle figure, that is a representation of someone's mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure. Within the individual, you have these different layers, you have different versions of themselves, because you got to consider that my premise is that souls exist. As a soul going through this human experience, we have different stages of life. And in these different stages of life, we have different ways that we show up in the world. For example, as a child, someone might be a social butterfly. They may, as a teenager, they may be withdrawn, like gothic, like to themselves, a loner. And then in their 20s, they may, I don't know, be like a leader, teacher, or somebody that wants to give back, very, very much more pro-social. And as they go through the lifespan, they may become different versions of themselves. But the new versions basically grow around the old versions. So we still have aspects of our younger selves within us, and it creates different layers. And so, depending on the individual, you could depict their MEII using different imagery. For example, someone might depict their internal world using the image of a house. It's a one floor house, one bedroom, one kitchen, whatever. Somebody else might depict their internal world using a mansion. They got a basement, they got a dungeon, they got a spiral staircase, they got 7 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, they got a pool. You know what I'm saying? Like some people have um, more complexity in their internal world, and up until now, I don't think research has elucidated that the complexity of individuals' internal worlds and how much um, how much depth people have within their intrapsychic world. And so, for my research, I'm looking at how the construction of that, the connections within that, how one area connects to another. Does this person compartmentalize things? How much stuff do you have compartmentalized? How much baggage are you carrying? How much space do you have to like express yourself freely? If we looked at human emotion as a range from like very, I don't know, if we just had a list of every emotion ever felt by any human, like how much of that does that can that person tolerate within themselves? Some people might keep themselves within a limited emotional range. They only feel happy, sad, or mad. Whereas other people, they may have 20 to 30 different words for different emotions that they feel. And it's similar to like um, shout out to my mom, going from like some people might have just a basic 8 pack crayon set, and that's their color palette when they're trying to describe the images that they're seeing. They're trying to paint the picture. They're only using the eight set of crayons, whereas other people may have the 64 pack or the 128 pack, or they may have their own custom crayons that they done took 2 crayons, melted them down, put them together. So there's a lot of room for ingenuity and new complexity and nuance within somebody's internal world that I think hasn't been captured or like investigated enough. So quality of life, on the other hand, is something that people have studied. And in my research, I'm basically broadening what people typically think of when they hear quality of life to include intersubjective, subjective, and then objective ways to classify it. And then that's across 8 different dimensions of wellness. So intersubjective, well, let's start with subjective, even though on the slideshow is second. Subjective quality of life is basically somebody's perception of their own um, well-being. Their, if you were to ask them like, rate your quality of life from 1 to 10, it's like that's their subjective self-report. That's not something that they need anybody else's opinion to do, and so that is one level. But the reason that can't be the totality of it is because sometimes we are blind to ourselves, and sometimes our perception of ourselves can have either blind spots or just be off, or we can have um, different factors, different things going on that's interfering with how well we can perceive ourselves that might actually be tied to our mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure. And so I added the intersubjective, which is quality of life perceived by other people that you can have a conversation with, and y'all can come to some compromise or some agreement about what it is. So it includes perceived mood, material wealth, social status. So, for example, someone who has a condition whereby their self perception is somehow unreliable, they may have a caregiver, and their caregiver can be someone that'll say, "Yeah, he don't know it, but I can see that he's irritated most days out of the week." Or they can also give a rating from 1 to 10 what that person's quality of life is because they're observing them closely. And then lastly, I put the objective, which doesn't require any human observer. It's just data. So that could be your heart rate, blood pressure, cortisol. There's no it doesn't require somebody to have an opinion about what it is. It's just going to be whatever it is. Whatever your cortisol level is, your blood pressure, it's just numbers. It's cold, hard facts, I guess. It's one way to say it. For the neuropsychological functioning, um, that will probably be, I guess that's borderline because honestly, I think that should be under intersubjective. So I may need to adjust this only because neuropsychological functioning is tested through performance based tests, and they include an observer, which is the psychologist. So typically, people don't just, I mean, you could self administer a test and get a score. So I guess in that way, it could be objective. Um, but typically, there's a psychologist, there's a battery of tests. It's not just one single test. And there's even though the psychologist is supposed to be like objective, like out of the way, like not interfering, their interpretation is going to inform like the assessment because they have to write up an interpretation and make recommendations for treatment. So this kind of puts all that together. That psychological advantageousness refers to the relationship between someone's mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure and their quality of life. And underneath their mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure, I just listed some but not all of the parts. And then under quality of life, I listed some but not all of the signifiers. So in any given test, we could look at what's the relationship between somebody's paradigm and their perceived mood. What's the relationship between somebody's beliefs and their material wealth? What's the relationship between somebody's mood states and their social status, their cognitive schemata, and their self-report on a mental health assessment, their dispositions and their income? You can mix and match them however you want. And really, what the literature and what the culture needs is for us to mix and match all of them. We need to go piecemeal paradigms. How does that affect perceived mood, material wealth, social status, self-report, etc.? Beliefs. How does that affect material wealth, social status, perceived mood, etc.? Like we need more investigation into these things. And you might ask, why do we need that? We need that so that we can move people from choosing things arbitrarily to making informed decisions. Because then, say you were neutral and you had a menu of beliefs, On that menu of beliefs, it could tell you before you decide to endorse the belief, what's the perceived mood on average associated with it? What's the material wealth on average associated? What's the social status? If you knew that um, 9 out of 10 people who believe that God exists earn were billionaires, or and 9 out of 10 people who believe God does not exist were homeless, would that affect your choice? Which one would you choose based on that information? Right now, we don't have that information. It's not clear. It's not written down anywhere. It's not published anywhere. Nobody's really investigated it. But this is the gap that I see in the literature, and this is where my research like finds its footing. Some people are hesitant to use the word better in terms of measuring quality of life or measuring beliefs. Like, how can you say one belief is better than another? And I think that may be clear up until now, but I'll still go through this. You can compare judging beliefs to judging art. Now, for some people, they'll say art is subjective, it can't be judged. And sorry to tell you, that is not true. Art is judged all the time. And people judge art by what they pay for. People judge art by which artist they go see. People judge art by the value that they set. Like, you can get your art appraised. When people are in art school, they get graded on it. Like, there's a lot of ways to judge art. You could judge it off the principles of art. You could judge it off of a theme. You could judge it off of its monetary value. You could judge it off of public opinion. People have art contests, so art is often judged. And in a similar way, beliefs can get the same treatment. I think people have an attachment to their beliefs, and maybe if they feel defensive or protective of their beliefs, people want to hold on to them, and ego says, no, not my beliefs. Like, my beliefs are great. My beliefs are not the problem. And even me as the researcher, I'm willing to concede that some of my beliefs, I would say probably all my beliefs, are affecting my quality of life. And I'm willing to hear that, even if I decide I'm going to keep the beliefs that aren't benefiting me. But at least at that point, I made a willful decision to stay there, because it goes back to mindfulness. Mindfulness isn't about changing, it's about becoming more aware. And in a similar way, we need to be able to define beliefs in terms of better or worse, because now we could call a spade a spade. And if somebody decides they want to hold on to a belief and they don't want to choose a better belief, that's still their choice. They still have free will, but they'll know, yeah, I did choose this belief, and this is what comes with that. An example could be hand dominance. Which hand dominance is the best for NBA players? And if we wanted to measure it, we can measure it by average points per game. If we took 100 left hand dominant people, 100 right hand dominant people, and then 100 ambidextrous people, which group on average has the highest points per game? And that would tell us, did out of the 100 left-handed players, was their average 15 points, and then the right-handers was 30 points, or the ambidextrous people was 50 points? That would tell us. My guess, my hypothesis is that ambidextrous players probably outperform single hand dominance players. Why? Because they probably can finish on both sides of the basket. They can finish with the right hand, finish with the left hand, shoot with both hands, pass with both hands. It just makes them more dynamic on the court. But this is all speculation. It could be the case, and this is why we need to actually do the scientific research, where it could be the case that the right hand dominant people, like the regular plain, what you might think is plain, wins. Like, that's the best one. Could be. But it's not clear yet at this point. And people don't necessarily, from my understanding, I've never seen anyone. Well, I guess I'm not there to see it, but I have never heard anyone say how they chose their handedness. I'm not actually sure how people choose their handedness. I think for some people, their parents just put a pencil in front of them and see which hand they pick it up with. And whatever hand they pick it up with and start writing with, that's the hand that they, it just goes based off that. Now, some could argue that that's not arbitrary, that their choice reflects some internal faculties that they already have at that age, which is why they lean towards grabbing it with that hand. Other people may say, no, they picked it up with the left hand and their family made them put it in their other hand. So there may be some people who could have been left handed, but were pushed to be right handed because that's the norm or that's popular or whatever the case is. Or vice versa. Maybe somebody was pushed to be left handed or ambidextrous just to be different, to diverge from the group in some way. Point being that we can determine which hand dominance is better than the others, and we can determine which beliefs are better than others. And it all goes back to judging the tree by the fruit. The tree would be the belief or the whatever other aspect of the person's mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure. And then the fruit will be their quality of life. So I'm judging what you believe based off what it's doing for you. How is it helping you? How is it hurting you? One of the inspirations for this work has come from my consumption or maybe overconsumption of motivational speakers. I've been watching motivational speakers for the past 6, maybe 7 years. I done watched them so many times. Now I could tell. And sometimes I can hear them sound like each other, and I can tell like who influenced who. You listen long enough, you start to hear a pattern. But I say that because, you know, in doing that, I realized they advocate for a lot of different messages that haven't been tested scientifically that probably would make good studies. Like a motivational speaker might tell you, if you're in sales and you knocked at 20 doors and you got 20 no's, to knock at 20 more, right? And so the mindset or whatever the belief is to keep going, to push past that 20 and keep going until you get a yes, that's going to be different from the person who says, I did 20, maybe this is not for me. Now, I don't know which one is actually better, but I think that's essentially what we will be testing to find out. I referenced the book Think and Grow Rich and As a Man Thinketh, which I spoke about earlier, and The Secret, because all of these books really focus on cognition, beliefs, aspects of the MEII, and through edifying those, you can change your quality of life. You can change your results. A common one, which you may have heard, is like people having an attitude of gratitude. People say like, if you're thankful for what you have now, then that's how you get more. And it's interesting because I would love to see that tested too, because we could get 100, maybe 1,000 people that practice gratitude and 100 people that don't, and see like, is it actually better? And then we could use that information for like people that are undecided or on the fence. They're like, should I practice gratitude? Should I not? Should I have thankful cognitions or should I not? And then they'll have like a printout to say, yeah, if you do, this is what on average out of 100 or 1,000 people or 100,000 people on average, this is how practicing these gratitude cognitions affects people's income or their health status or their quality of life. This is just to go further into what James Allen was saying. I touched on it earlier, but I really like how he worded it in a way. Maybe this was regular, like how they talked when he was alive. Today, it seems a little esoteric. It says, they themselves are makers of themselves by virtue of the thoughts which they choose and encourage. So when I read that, to me, that's saying that people are self-made. Like people create themselves, and the mechanism by which people create themselves is their thoughts, the thoughts that they choose, not necessarily the thoughts that they hear, because you can have automatic thoughts all day. But which thoughts do you latch on to? Which thoughts do you identify with? And which thoughts do you encourage or like gas up? Which thoughts do you magnify and feed into? Right. And he said that mind is the master weaver, both of the inner garment of character and the outer garment of circumstance. And I colored these phrases to line them up with the MEII and quality of life. Where he says mind is the master weaver, I would reword that because we're essentially saying the same thing, but that part, I would say the soul is the master weaver. The soul is the agent inside of the flesh. It's the animating life force inside of the body. And it's the soul that picks and chooses, that sets, the sets up the MEII. The MEII is built like a wall or it's constructed from the ground up by an agent inside of it. Now, parts of it, you could argue that, people don't necessarily build or choose their inputs because, for especially during early childhood, you're just inundated with information from your environment. But it's up to the soul how it rests within them. Similar to like Tetris. On Tetris, you don't pick which blocks come down. You just get to pick where you place them. And how you place them is going to either leave a bunch of gaps and you're going to run out of space, or it's going to fit neatly and you can start to condense. Like you get a clean row and it deletes that row. So it's like, all right, this all fits together and I got more space. Um, so I would say the mind is the one choosing where the blocks fall, even if the environment is the one giving you the blocks, if it was Tetris. The inner garment of character is someone's MEII, their mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure. And then the outer garment of circumstance would be their quality of life. And it says, and that as they may have hitherto woven in ignorance and pain, they may now weave in enlightenment and happiness. And that's essentially what this is about. Up until now, people are arbitrarily choosing their beliefs. They playing Tetris and they just doing the best they can with what they have, but they don't really understand the game fully. As you get more understanding of the game and you get more understanding of life, you can make informed decisions about what you're believing, how you're constructing your mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure, and what you want, what quality of life outcomes you're looking for. And if you understand the relationship between MEII and quality of life, then you can just actually choose things that are going to get you closer to what you're trying to get out of life, even if it means it'll get you further away from other things that you don't want. So that's weaving in enlightenment and happiness. That's at that point you become, I guess you could say like self-actualized if we use Maslow's hierarchy, where you can willfully choose, okay, I know I want to be financially free. So therefore, maybe I need to change my beliefs. I need to get around financially free people to see what they believe to get the exposure. And then maybe I need to substitute my belief that when I get paid, I need to go out and get a drink. Or when I get paid, I need to go out to dinner. And I could switch that, and whatever those people that have the quality of life that I'm looking for, I can do what they do. Whereas they may say, when I get paid, I invest. When I get paid, I'm going to go in the house and cook. I'm not going to a fancy dinner just to, spend my earned income on something that's not going to bring me back money. Going back to therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy is like a very popular therapy modality. And it basically focuses on this cognitive triangle and leveraging the relationship between somebody's cognition, which is their thoughts, their affect, which is basically their emotions, and their behaviors, which is like their actions. And they say that by change the cognition is the entry point to change the other two. So since what you think affects how you feel, they basically advocate that people become more aware of cognitive distortions, things that interfere with how people think, and to get rid of those distortions so that you can see things more clearly, you can think more clearly, and then you can become more intentional about how you want to feel. For example, if you walk down the street, somebody bump into you, you might have a thought, why did this person do that? Who is this? Who they think I am? You might feel disrespected, like you just gonna bump into me, you ain't gonna say excuse me or nothing. And maybe you punch him in the face. Now you locked up for assault or whatever the case is. Y'all got to go through this whole legal battle about who hit who first. In CBT, using this cognitive triangle, they said if we could slow that situation down and replay it, but choose a better thought. So somebody bumps into you, you're not thinking they did this on purpose. Your thought might be, it was an accident. It ain't that bad. Like, they're in their own world. Or I could think, or you could think, anyone could think, one could think, even if they try and do that, my life is more valuable. Like, I got stuff to lose. I can't just be out here fighting somebody on the side of the street because they bumped into me. Like, however it goes. But basically, it's about thought replacement, and it emphasizes the power of thoughts. And I think that's very relevant because if we can change, if we saying thoughts are important, beliefs are also important because your beliefs influence your thoughts. There's a relationship between cognition and thoughts you have, and then what's called cognitive appraisal, which is the meaning that you assign to your experiences. And in that situation, you could take getting bumped to mean somebody's trying you, and this is a place where you need to defend yourself, or you could take it to mean this is an enigma. This is an opportunity for me to practice patience. This is an opportunity where if you believe in the devil, going back to ontology, the devil's trying to throw me off my square, trying to, take me down this tangent. This is a distraction. I'm actually not even supposed to get into it with this person. I could just go on about my day. I could get out their way and just let them, do what they was doing. This slide basically reiterates what I just described. So we could skip this. And these are some of the research questions. I do have answers to these questions, but that will not be on this presentation. This presentation was really just to define what psychological advantageousness is. Psychological advantageousness basically refers to a relationship between someone's mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure and their quality of life, and the components of the mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure in their quality of life. And by assessing the psychological advantageousness of different aspects of the MEII and the gestalt of the whole MEII, people can become more informed livers, not like the organ, but people can make more informed decisions. Their lives can be woven in enlightenment and happiness rather than in ignorance and pain, to put it in James Allen's words. And noteworthy to mention is that this, even though this research is psychology, it is also, I guess, is at the intersection between psychology and philosophy, because ultimately it's not the individual who is under scrutiny, it's the belief, it's the MEII that's under scrutiny, or its components. And once we can attach statistics to beliefs or aspects of the MEII, then anyone should be able to adopt that, like pick those up or discard them, and make more informed decisions about how they're constructing their own MEII. If anyone has any questions about this, feel free to put them in a comment. Yeah, and I'll do another one to get more about like the answers to these questions and more research updates. And look out for my art show. All right.